My sister fell in love with my fiance after one meeting and my parents expected me to call off our wedding so she could have him instead. I come from a relatively small family. It's just my mom, dad, my sister and I. I am 28 female, and my sister is 24. I may be a little biased because I am the one in the situation, but I'm not exactly the favorite child. Everyone seems to do what my sister wants. They give her whatever she desires. It's been like that since we were kids and it's so annoying. When it comes to me, everyone thinks I should be able to handle myself and be mature. It's true, but not as a kid. What could I do for myself at that time? Anyways, it helped me become a better person today. At least I don't depend on my parents for anything, unlike my sister. At 20, I moved out of my parents' house because I was honestly sick of their favoritism. I moved to my first apartment. It was a small one as that was all I could afford, going to school and working at the same time. I was super proud of myself for pulling it off. From there I kept growing. I graduated from school with honors and went on to do my master's, which I completed last year. I'm doing pretty well for myself, but it still feels like I am invisible to my family, and I have come to terms with it. I'm getting married to my longtime boyfriend and the love of my life. We have been together since my second year in university, which makes it about 5 years since we started dating, though we have known each other for much longer than that. My relationship with my family affected me a little bit, to the point where I thought I couldn't have meaningful relationships because I felt like I had nothing to offer. But when I met Ricky, that's not his real name by the way, and built an amazing relationship with him, I realized that I am not the problem. I decided that I will no longer beat myself up for not having a close relationship with my family. We do talk once in a while, but all just surface stuff. I think you get the point. We are just not close as most families are with their first child, which I honestly think is strange. Anyways, Ricky and I have been going at it for years, like I mentioned, and he proposed to me the day we went out to celebrate my master's degree. I was so excited. We had talked about marriage a lot, and we both knew that that was where our relationship was heading. He proposed to me in the most romantic of ways in the presence of my closest friends. I had thought that we were just going to hang out, and then one of my friends said we should speak about what we all mean to each other. She convinced us to do it. I later found out that it was all an act though. When it was Ricky's turn, he spoke about everyone and left me for last. He said the sweetest of things, and I was almost tearing up when he proposed. That moment was so magical, and even reliving it takes me right back to that spot, and I feel the exact same way. I love him so much. I didn't feel the need to tell my family until we were ready to start making plans. After all, they didn't even know I was dating, and I don't think they cared. Ricky finally persuaded me to tell them, so I went home one weekend with him. That day he was looking so good I had to tease him about trying to impress my parents, and he didn't deny it. My sister wasn't home when we arrived, but she came in a few minutes later. Can you imagine that she kept flirting with him even after she found out that I brought him home as my fiancé, who I was obviously going to marry? I was irritated at my sister's behavior and the fact that my mom said nothing to her. Ricky helped me keep my cool though, because he held me tightly to his side the whole time. My parents seemed happy for me. Well, it's not like they had a choice. I wasn't there to take permission, but to inform them of my decision. After some weeks, Ricky took me to one of our favorite places, and I noticed that he was being extra gentle with me. He did that when he had something serious to tell me or something he wasn't comfortable with, so I braced myself up for it. I was so curious that before we got to the restaurant I asked him what the problem was and what he wanted to tell me. He asked me to calm down and that he wasn't running away. He told me that my sister had been flirting with him since they met. She found him on social media and wouldn't let him be, so now it's uncomfortable for him. She told him to leave me because she was better for him than I was. I was furious. How far could she really go? I didn't want to speak to her on the phone, so I told Ricky that I was going to my parents' house the next day to set things straight. Update 1. I arrived at my parents' house at noon. I had called beforehand to let them know I was coming, and I wanted everyone to be home because I needed to discuss something important. It was Saturday, so I could easily get everyone together. My mom told me that it was perfect that I was coming because she wanted to speak to me as well. I told them that my sister has been flirting with my fiancé and I wanted her to stop immediately. There were so many other guys and mine was already taken, so she needed to behave herself. Thinking about it now, I could puke. My mom said that that was why she wanted to speak to me, because my sister hadn't been herself since she met Ricky, because she was in love with him. She asked me to let Ricky go and let my sister have him. Ricky wasn't a toy. I told them that they were the most selfish people I have ever met in my life, and I was ashamed to identify with them as my family. My mom did all the talking while my sister was crying crocodile tears, and my dad, as far as I am concerned, is a figurehead because he does whatever my mom wants. Mom told me that I was the selfish one, putting my needs before my sister's, and that it was what she had tried to teach me for years, but I never got it. That was the most ridiculous statement I had ever heard in my entire life. I told them that I would do no such thing. I have been with Ricky for 5 years and we are engaged to be married, so I can't break up with him because my sister, who only met him once, developed feelings for him. My mom said that they wouldn't be a party to my wedding then, since I cannot fulfill their wishes and do what they are asking me to do as my parents. Dad didn't say anything, but I knew he would just do what she wanted because he didn't have a backbone to stand up for himself. It was not the first time that they treated me this way and expected me to be at the beck and call of my sister just because she was unhappy about something or she was throwing some stupid tantrum. After that I left. I was so upset that I cried in my car as I drove back home. How did I get there and who were these people? Could they even hear themselves? If the tables were turned, would my mother ask my sister to break up with her fiancé for me? Ricky thought I had to be lying when I told him what happened. He had known about how my parents treated me, but this threw him off. I told him that I was sorry that my family wouldn't be at my wedding because my sister is in love with him. Even saying it out loud felt ridiculous. Update 2, preparations for my big day were going really smoothly. My family hasn't come back to their senses. My sister is still trying to get with Ricky. He blocked her on every platform that she ever reached out to him, so I hope that sends her the message and she understands that he would never leave me for her. If I were a man and the sister of my fiancé was trying to get with me, especially openly, I definitely would not agree to it because it tells me about the kind of person she is. My friends have been the best and they have been there for me, making sure I wasn't stressed out about my family issues. My best friend called my mom and sister to speak some sense into them, but they were adamant. My mom admitted that the only reason why she said she wouldn't come to the wedding was because she thought it would stop me from getting married to Ricky. I laughed so hard when I heard that. My mom really thinks she is that important to me. Sure, I want my family at my wedding, but if they are acting crazy, then they can stay out of it. It's not like they ever made me feel important or wanted in the family before, so my wedding wouldn't be different. Something I did though was still send them an invitation, so it was solely on them if they decided not to come. I was letting them know that they had a chance to be in my life, but in my mind I knew that it was the last straw. My relationship with my family depended on how they handled this. If they came back to their senses, then we would move past it, but if they decided to act funny, then I would cut them off from my life because I don't want any negative energy around me. The ball was in their court. Update 3, my wedding was all I eerily dreamt of and more. I'm writing this from my honeymoon destination as a married woman. I can't believe it. Guys, I'm seriously married to the love of my life. Ricky is everything to me. I am so thankful to him for standing by me and not running away from me and my crazy family. Speaking of which, they didn't come for my wedding. I was really hurt. I kept giving periodic glances at the congregation to see if they would show up, but they didn't. Ricky knew that that was what I was doing, so he hugged me and asked me to focus on him and I would be fine, because right there and then both of us were all that mattered. It was our day, and no matter who was absent or who wasn't happy with our marriage, for whatever reason we were happy, and it was the best day of our lives because we had waited years for this. Ricky's family is so loving, so they would have to be enough for Ricky and I, because right now, right here, my heart doesn't recognize that I have parents or a sibling. I don't know if it would ever change, but I choose to be happy regardless. I don't really know how to even start this. Well, I, 32 male, have 3 kids, 6 female, 4 female, 7 male, but only my daughters are shared with my wife. I married my wife 6 years ago. Before her, I had a friend with benefits I met in college, but she had to move out the city and I didn't hear anything about her. A year ago, she contacted me out of the blue to let me know I was her 6-year-old son's father, which pissed me off. We did all the tests to make sure he was my son, and yeah, he is a 100%. She made clear that she contacted me because she was struggling financially and needed my help, not because she wanted to destroy my life. My wife wasn't happy about this, but as it happened before I met her, she couldn't complain. I'm no one to deny a child the right to spend time with his dad, since I know how much it hurts, so I asked his mom to let me spend the weekends with him. He is great and we learned to love each other, so we changed it to 50-50 custody for her to settle down, and because I love spending time with my boy. Our house has 4 bedrooms, 1 for me and my wife, 2 for our daughters, 1 for guests. It was until my son came into the equation. Once my son appeared, I renovated the room to give it to him, even though he only spent weekends with us. For the first 3 months after I found out, he had a room of his own in our house, so he feels welcomed, and now that he spends a week with us, he personalized it and really feels like owns it. He does. My daughters love him and he loves them back. My wife is indifferent, but I'm not asking her to be my son's mom. He already has one. This past week was my time to have my son. My wife knew it, but my in-laws were going to visit us. We only have 4 rooms, so we had 2 options. They sleep on the couch. They go to a hotel. My wife didn't say anything, and I assumed she knew what the situation was since my son was staying with us that week too. And even if he wasn't, this is his room now and no one goes in when he isn't around. So, I think my wife assumed I would skip my week since in-laws were coming and they used to stay in that room. Her surprise was when I picked up my son and took him home. She was kind of pissed off and said, "You know my parents are coming, right?" "I know, what's the issue?" I replied, "Where are they supposed to stay?" Said my wife, "In a hotel." She went mad and started telling me to take my son back and skip this week, but I said no, this is also my son's house and has more rights to be here than in-laws. So in-laws had to stay in a hotel but didn't last that long. They left 3 days later, supposed to stay 2 weeks. Now my wife says I humiliated them and calls me the a-hole for not skipping my week, but if I skipped I had to wait 2 weeks to have him around, and my son loves spending time with me and I love spending time with him and my daughters. So am I the a-hole for the way I treated my in-laws and not skipping my week? For context, I, 14 female, lived with my grandma for a year because I can't stand my mom's boyfriend because she chose him over me. I told her I'd move out if he moved in because he makes remarks about my body and appearance and it makes me very uncomfortable. I'll call her boyfriend Jay. I moved back in with my mom because I was having some issues with my grandma the year I lived with her. I set rules like I'll have a lock on my door, I'll never be in the house alone with Jay, and I wouldn't call him my dad. There wasn't an issue up until after a month after I moved in when Jay's kids were there. He sees them 2 times a month. They're from his previous marriage. His daughter came into my room and said that dad wanted me, and I said okay, tell Jay I'll be there in a minute, as I was just finishing getting ready to go to my friend's house. I went to the living room where my mom and Jay were and he asked if I was ready to go to lunch and I said no, I'm gonna to Jenna's house. And I already had plans and wasn't aware I was supposed to go to lunch with them. He proceeded to yell about how I never spend time with them and I'm always out, never letting him know where I am. I told him I told my mom and he said, "I'm your dad, you should let me know too." I started laughing and said, "You're not my dad and I would rather die than call you my dad." He went ballistic. He told me I'm not going anywhere with my disrespectful attitude and that sooner or later he's gonna be my dad whether I like it or not. I told him even if you married my mom you will always just be my dad's replacement in my eyes, then walked back up to my room. He was banging on my door telling me to let him in. I locked the door, I just left out my window and went to my friend's house. Around an hour later my mom called me and told me saying all of that in front of his kids was uncalled for, and if I didn't like Jay, I could leave again. So I moved in with my other grandma and told my mom I was telling the truth and I didn't care what he thought about it. My dad was proud of me for sticking up for myself, but my mom's still mad at me, so I want to know if I was in the wrong.